Morning, everybody. This is a screencast to walk all of our coaches through the EQuIP exchange, review exchange process and the vetting process. I'll be totally honest, did not do the best job explaining this in December based on the amount of questions that I've had about it. And I think that's probably a good thing because we're actually going to make some changes to how this process works. And that's another reason I want to share the screencast with everybody. The big change I want to note is that in December I'd said it should be the reviewer's coach responsibility to vet, and after thinking this through and looking at the exchange process, we really think that the unit author's coach should be the one to vet the EQuIP reviews. And the reason for that, I think, will be apparent when we go through this together, but it's really that it comes down to that the coach of the unit author is going to have a lot invested in wanting to get that review back right away. So they're going to be diligent about vetting those reviews and getting them to their teachers and communicating to their teachers about that process. And by doing that, it streamlines things. So you're not waiting for someone else to vet the review before you can pass it on. So I apologize for the lack of clarity, and I appreciate everybody understanding and your patience through this process. So down here, we're on the 2015-16 core teacher contact list in Google Drive. This is within a folder known as the core teacher information folder that's in our Idaho Coaching Network folder. This is where we keep all of our spreadsheets and stuff like that. You'll notice down here that we created a round 1 and a round 2 tab for the unit exchange. This is the coaches only sheet right here that I was talking about because it has a lot more information such as their names, which is what we need in order to get our reviews back to everybody. So you're going to be here in your round 1 sheet, and I've got this example set up here down at the bottom. You'll also notice that for the most part we have teachers put into groups of 3. And the main reason for that is to try and get them in similar grade levels, and also to make this review process easy, because Joe is going to review Chuck and Chris's unit, and Chuck is going to review Joe and Chris's unit, and Chris is going to review Joe and Chuck's units. So they're all kind of tied together in a nice, neat little group. So let's pretend like it's February 7th. It's the deadline for the first, for one of the EQuIP reviews to be finished. And I am Joe Doe's coach. Joe Doe is my teacher. Joe Doe wrote a unit in my Region 7, and I really want to get Joe his EQuIP review feedback back to him. So I look here, and Joe's unit number is 777. So I'm going to look over here under review for unit, the first one, number 1, and see who reviewed 777. Nope, it wasn't Chuck. Oh, look, this Chris Butts guy, he reviewed it first. This was his number 1 review. So what I'm going to do now is, like I said, I see that it's right here. I look and see this name. It's Chris Butts. So now I'm going to go over to Schoology and look for a review submitted by Chris Butts. So I go to EQuIP review number 1 in Schoology. So I'm in, you start there in module 11. Is the first place that you would go for that, and then I would click on review number 1, and then I look over here to see if Chris Butts has submitted his review, and lo and behold, he has. So as Joe's coach, I would click on his review, and I would check it out. And we're going to pretend like there's a review right here, and I'm going to look it over, and let's say I feel really good about this review, and if I know Joe really well, and I just skimmed through it, and the feedback looks thorough. All the criteria is addressed. This Chris Butts guy did a good job. So at that point, I will download the review, and I will share it with my teacher, Joe. And when I share it with my teacher, Joe, I'm actually going to check it off right here under this column that says Review Returned to Author. And that indicates that this review that was done by Chris Butts, even though it's not my teacher, it was of my teacher's unit. So I'm going to check this off right here. to indicate for myself and for Chris's coach to let him know that this review was okay and this review has been returned to the unit author. So let's fast forward to review number 2. And I want to see, all right, my teacher's Joe is number 777. Who's doing 777 second? Oh, it's right here. It is Chuck. So I'm gonna try and find Chuck Buck here, and I'm gonna look under EQuIP review number 2. So I would go back out to this. Keep in mind here, this is a couple weeks later, and look here under EQuIP review number 2. Maybe Chuck had something happen. He's behind. He hasn't submitted it yet. At that point, I could communicate to Chuck's coach and say, hey, I'm trying to get my teacher Joe his unit review. I don't see Chuck submitted it yet. What's going on? Let's pretend that Chuck has submitted it and I've downloaded it. But I look at it and I'm not so sure if it's such a good review of Joe's unit. So I go to the directions for the EQuIP review, and it lists everything in here about what needs to go into all reviews, what a completed form needs to include, also has some suggestions about that. And, I look through it and I can say, you know what, there were not, the feedback was not specific at all. It was all really vague. So at that point, if I'm as the unit author's coach, if I'm unhappy with the review for my teacher, then I'm going to get a hold of Chuck's coach and communicate that to him or her and say, I really appreciate Chuck turning in that review, but we agreed that things need to be specific. His review's not specific. Here's the review. Take a look at it. Please deal with it. And then I'll hand it off to Chuck's coach to communicate with Chuck about how to revise that review. In this column then, under review returned to unit author, it hasn't been returned to the unit author yet because it still needs to be revised. So I could put in this column here that the second review needs revision as a placeholder for me and a placeholder for that coach to say we need to deal with this. It's really important that you also email the teacher's coach so they know, because we don't want to just make it mandatory for coaches to be in here all the time checking for this. You just want to email them and let them know right away. So let's say Chuck's coach works with Chuck and they revise the review and they feel really good about it. Chuck's coach is just going to email me directly about it, and Chuck will resubmit the unit review onto EQuIP for number 2, and then and I can take a look at it and see, yeah, it makes sense, it's good, feel good about passing this on to Joe, and then as Joe's coach, I will change it from needs revision to that X. If for some reason I disagree with that coach about whether or not the revisions were good, then we need to have a conversation about that and elaborate on why. Like I said, we have these criteria here to base that on, and we all have a lot of practice working with teachers on that. So I really hope that that's something that is a pretty easy thing to come into agreement on. So like I said, the kind of summary is when you want to get those EQuIP reviews to your teachers, you're going to have this spreadsheet open and this Schoology open, and you're going to be kind of going back and forth. And kind of key move here is to make sure that you check off next to these reviews here when they're returned to the unit author. Even though I'm Joe's coach, I'm not actually checking anything off in here. I'm leaving it up to the coaches of Chuck and Chris to get those reviews and get them to those teachers, and they will check these off. I hope that helps and as clear can be in this kind of situation. Please let me know if you have any questions, and thank you for your patience.